Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I am absolutely humbled to have the opportunity to share some ideas and some very interesting analytical results with you. And I have to say, last night when I was tossing and turning, I was trying to find out why it was I felt at home here with all the ideas and the speakers. And at first I thought it was just because I'm a descendant of a Scottish Highlander. But I realized it was much more than that. It was because I too was taught at a very young age that the Constitution protected the American public. My father would have us recite various pieces of the Declaration and the Constitution. My older sisters were not happy, and I remembered more than they did. But it's that basis and that conservative ideal that has led me throughout my life, including all of those universities where I was looking for answers and found the only answers that I could develop were within myself and within the lessons that I was taught as a child. I'm in charge here with the button. The Constitution yesterday, Madison is one of my favorites. Obviously, he was the architect of our United States Constitution, but he warned us of the dangers of political factions. So much so that Americans needed the United States Constitution to protect us. The lesson from the beginning, the preamble of the Constitution is such that we need to be reminded that we are our government. If we forget that government is not us, we the people, then we have surrendered our authority over elected officials and over the bureaucracy which seems to dictate our lives. And I'll pigtail off our wonderful last speaker by saying without education, civic education and knowledge of the Constitution, the Declaration, and those biblical principles that are the foundation for all of it, we would not understand that we need to be engaged and active in our own government. This is why I founded the Center for Leadership in Government, Politics, and Public Policy. My first speaking engagement in Philadelphia, I asked thousands of people who were in attendance at the Academy of Management if they believed politicians were leaders. I had no affirmation. No one said yes. They said, "You've got to be kidding. Is this a joke?" And I said, I'm doing a serious survey among my peers. What we found is throughout history, if we have a vertical line which says influence on it, and I apologize it got cut off on this slide, throughout time, the development of communication has been used against the American public with deception and political communication that was intended to deceive and pull you to one candidate or away from another rather than inform you. At the very beginning, with teas in your homes, those cells you talk about, speeches, attending debates in 1850, think of the Lincoln-Douglas debate, people drove miles in horse and buggy to see face-to-face leaders who would be their representatives. And as the communication went more and more toward telephones, toward the first digital phase with Obama's administration and his first election, we saw the rise of what I call political class influence. In my first book, I came up with the term political class, in 2007. A few politicians on the federal level got a hold of it and started to bounce it around in the press. The press liked it so much that everyone started to use the word political class, not understanding that I was referring to them. The establishment who believed they were entitled to their positions at the expense of the American people. Now what's concerning is the decline of voter intelligence. That's what I mean, PQ, political intelligence. Because one thing I want you to remember is that chaos bred by political communication is intended to control, not illuminate. In 2016, we often hear the term seismic shift with the Trump presidential race. We had what was called an insurrection of the populace, the people, who turned out in record numbers and did exactly what they were told not to do. They voted for an individual who was not a part of the political establishment and who, in plain speak, said what he was going to do in office. As I mentioned, keep this in mind, our politicians, leaders, who are they? How are they influenced? And can we predict how a politician will vote? And can we predict the outcome of elections? And I'm sure Milton Friedman would have something to say about what our findings were, because he would agree. Number one influence of leaders is money. You have to make it politically or financially advantageous for the wrong people to do the right thing. Political party, peer pressure, groupthink. If you're a part of a political party, you must vote this way, or we'll primary you. 3, political motives, or self-aggrandizement. Individuals are motivated by climbing up that ladder and becoming the next emperor. The press, and we are on the bottom. Those individuals that went into public service, as I did, self-term limited, on the radio saying no more than 3 terms, I'm out of here, I've got an agenda, and I'm going to figure out what that is by going door to door. We would put the citizens first. But this is not who the orthodoxy is. There is no quiz after this, but I wanted to give you a snapshot of what the leadership types were that we found. Transforming leaders, commitment, individual opinion, focusing on others, and experience. Not necessarily been in office for 50 years or 40 years or 20 years. Experience in life, in business, in how to succeed with values. Transformational, wanting to change the system, but more controlled focus. Now, the scary type that we identified were the laissez-faire. The duck and cover political leaders who won't give you their position on an issue. You have to somehow look at the congressional record to see how they voted. Ambiguity of thoughts, they have no stake, they'll show up, they won't show up. But the truly dark force, or the shadows of political leaders, can be the transactional and the Machiavellians. If I get this horse traded, if I have these donations, I will pull this issue up before my committee. If committee chairmen are allowed to do that. In the last Congress, we saw control by the minority leader and the House Speaker. Machiavellian, you recognize as the deep, dark shadow of political leader. Arrogance, criticism for others, chaos creation. Again, chaos is intentional. It's a means to control the people who can't understand what's up and what's down. Now you can say, okay, how do I know this? What's this big data piece? I was lucky enough to be partnered with some big data professionals from out of the United States. They originally from New Delhi and the UK. We're looking for someone with innovative ideas on how it is we can ensure that the people were put back in charge of their own governments. And when I presented my dissertation and proposal in Philadelphia, they asked if they could meet with me. So we built models together on what a leadership type was, and then I did something unheard of. I created something called the Integrity Index. simplified, what we did is we took a politician's own words, actions, and behaviors, monitored it digitally from archived documents, their own speeches, their own committee hearings, 27 and a half hours of committee hearings, analyzed with conceptual software, where we could literally see what type of leader these individuals were. I don't want to bog you down with details, but if you ask questions later, I'll be more than happy to answer them. What did we find with Hillary Clinton and President Trump, candidate Trump at the time? We found that he was a transforming and transformational leader, and he fell down on transactional and Machiavellian. Where he fell down, Hillary Clinton stood up. She wanted to transform the system, but she was key on transactional leadership and on Machiavellianism. We wouldn't know what she would do in office if she were elected. Now, I know this sounds like a lot of information, but it's very simple. In analyzing how a joint committee hearing acted with the political leaders, we found that there was evidence with a high degree of certainty that they were motivated first with money, second by political party, third by motive and ambition, fourth by the press, the testimony that was overwhelmingly to strike down the Common Core. In 2016, all of that changed. Money didn't have the effect. As you know, candidate Trump didn't have the money that both Jeb Bush or Hillary Clinton did. If we were under the old paradigm, the old orthodoxy, it would have been a contest between Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton, but it wasn't. In fact, there was no influence except we could identify using a technique called crowdsourcing that the American people wanted of President Trump. Now that seems scary, but using Twitter, hundreds of thousands of tweets, we were able to identify through the American public's comments who they were leaning toward. So what's the future of civic education? And I have to share this, even though I can't quantify it. I have read, and maybe some of you can back me up, how many of you have heard of the Podesta email dump on WikiLeaks?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Did any of you find the email between the NEA chairperson on Hillary Clinton's campaign? Well, search for it. It's enlightening. I'll paraphrase it. It stated, it was commiserating, and this will go to your comments, sir, on education and spending. It commiserated that they had removed civic education in K-12 public schools across the country. They had maligned government every time they could in order to make the public pliable. But still, this Trump seems to be increasing his support, and they didn't know why.
Couldn't happen to a nicer bunch.
What's the future of civic education? If I'm using big data analysis to reveal who political leaders are, what type they are, what kind of integrity they have, then we need to understand that there's two lenses of looking at this. The orthodox way, which is completely contrary to the Constitution and the Founding Fathers, the new orthodox, and those of us that identify as a patriot or a heretic. And the donor system rules in the present day orthodoxy. Donations rule and direct public policy. It's a fall in line spoil system. Now what happened in 2016 is that the heretics stepped up, the populace, the people stepped up. And what we have, instead of protocol, we have a very politically incorrect president who is open and direct. He even tweets directly to the American people. We have a fall in line spoil system that's replaced with unfiltered communication and direct conversation. Staffers are replaced by a candidate who speaks for himself, by a president who speaks for himself. And the donors directing public policy are now replaced by an America First agenda. This is what happened in 2016. The political class slid, the people rose. It's up to us to determine what happens next. I talked about integrity. Let me translate it even more simply. That second column, all three areas as a measure of what integrity is. The only candidate for the United States presidency in 2016 that had all three measurable was candidate Trump. A comparison between candidate Trump and candidate Clinton shows clearly the difference in the American perception of who they could trust. This is how we were able to predict a Trump presidency 6 months out. Now, what you heard in the press, and we all know we can believe the American press because they're the fourth branch of government, right?
Exactly.
What we heard from the press were these personality analyses of all the presidential candidates, and they pointed out how President Trump scored high on neuroticism and how awful that was. Well, let me tell you about the software that we used to show it and what it meant. It meant that emotions sensitive to the environment were neuroticism. I want to be that kind of neurotic. He was sensitive to the American public. He listened, and the public responded because they could see someone who cared. This was our snapshot, and we had a daily window where you could literally see the American public breathing with positive emotions for or against candidate Trump or candidate Clinton at the time. The red is candidate Trump, and we measured courage, strength, competence, honesty, charisma, and you can see where the red line is, and you can see where the blue line is. This was using crowdsourcing. So you use big data to scrape all the social media. You put the patterns together, write algorithms for these types of values that we were seeing in polls that people wanted, and we measured them.
Amen. Yep.
George Washington said that we wouldn't need political parties if we had a free and appropriate press.
Yep.
Some of us can relate to this one.
Oh, yeah.
So what we did also is we monitored using big data the press, the television, political commentators, in order to find out if they were speaking positive or negative about the political candidates and how much time they were giving them on the air. The top one is showing the difference between, again, President Trump or candidate Trump is the red line, Hillary Clinton is the blue line on the top. And across the bottom, first presidential debate, post-debate, second debate, third debate. So it has a value of time where you can see how they were commenting over time after the debates. So we start out with a 22-point differential with Chuck Todd speaking poorly about President Trump.
Meet the press.
He's in there too. George Stephanopoulos has a very interesting curve. He only weighs in up to the first presidential debate. Does anybody know why George Stephanopoulos got quiet after that? Something to do with a very large donation to the Clinton Foundation?
Yep.
And he speak very highly up through the second debate with Hillary Clinton, and then by the time after post third debate, he could see the writing on the wall. Same thing with Chuck Todd. Jake Tapper took a different route. He didn't begin speaking about Hillary Clinton until the second presidential debate. He started out at a neutral level for candidate Trump, and then sank down to 22% negative, and then slowly went up when it looked like there would be a President Trump. John Dickerson, you've heard that name, you brought him up. You can see the red line is candidate Trump, and the negative speak. And you can see the straight line for Hillary Clinton up until post-first debate. The future, in my opinion, rests with the past. Yes, I've got these digital big data tools that can say what you already know. The American people predict presidents and all candidates by the fact that they go to the poll, they engage in elections, and they're integrally involved and a part of the election and governance process. If we don't, then the money takes over. And the political fall-in-line mentality, the political party takes over. We all know that conservatives have been purged. They'll be purged again. It's inconvenient to have someone representing the people in public office. The future of civic education is in our hands. Those of you that are on school boards, running for state superintendent, please remember that the NEA chairperson on the Hillary Clinton campaign confessed that they pulled civic education. He confessed that they were trying to make the American people pliable. What we're trying to do in this startup research and educational center is to put tools in the hands of the American public. Can you imagine if you had an app on your phone where you could say what state you were in, what congressional district you lived in, you could pull up the candidates running for office, and you can see through data-driven results. That means near certainty in their own words and actions if they were a Machiavellian or a transforming leader, and if they had a high level of integrity. Can you imagine if you had that power in your hands to make your own decisions, to help you navigate through the political communication, which is intended to create chaos and intended to deceive? Well, that's what we're working on. If you'd like to know more, please go to our website. I have some business cards in the back. A book I'm working on right now will detail what we found, how we did it, and it will be called The Weapons of Mass Disruption.
I like that. Good. So,
A new way to look at American politics and politics.